In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to be talking about all the cool stuff that's been happening in free agency and with the Bulls and the Blackhawks. And I don't know, we'll see where it happens after that. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. And we will be talking more about what's going to happen in this coming season in Rockford. So if you like what you hear, you make sure you head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, my friend, how are you doing?
I can't complain. Can't complain. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And, you can't complain, but even if you did, Jed's not going to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, three of the last four games have been pretty fun to watch, but yeah, I'm not doing that. Oh, here they come bit just yet. So,
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. This team's not good. I mean, they're breaking hands, punching walls. Like this is
yeah,
just not a good baseball team.
it's just too
But
bad because the starting pitching is really good, but the hitting's inconsistent. They make weird mistakes, and yeah, we've talked about it at nauseum. So
yeah, I want to start here talking about the Bulls. If you're good with that.
yeah, that's fine.
So we talked last week about the Bulls draft and their lone draft pick. Uh, and but free agency opened up, and you saw uh the Bulls make a few moves. But the big thing is they traded away DeMar DeRozan. So we all knew that he wasn't going to re-sign. And apparently in his camp, it was the fate was sealed once they traded Caruso. Um, and I think as fans, we were all frustrated because you were going to let him go for nothing unless you were able to orchestrate a sign and trade. And they were. So they got a three-team sign and trade with Sacramento, San Antonio, and the Bulls. So DeMar DeRozan went to Sacramento. Harrison Barnes goes to San Antonio. Chris Duarte, two second-round picks, and cash considerations, which Jerry Reinsdorf's favorite player,
Hmm.
come to Chicago. So I have a lot of thoughts about this trade and considering where they were and how little leverage they had. I don't think this is a bad deal. Um, my frustration comes with the fact that when he had value, either last offseason or at the trade deadline this year, you could have gotten real value for him. And instead, you you ran the team back out, didn't make the playoffs, and then you basically lose him for a bad player and a couple second round picks.
Well, I mean, that's the whole frustration of this whole thing is we heard about the rumors of Alex Caruso, what he could have brought at the middle of last year. We heard good offers for Andre Drummond for crying out loud. And you lost Alex Caruso. So, okay, you got Josh Giddey, but you didn't get any draft capital in return. And then you lost Andre Drummond for nothing. Now, you could have lost DeMar DeRozan for nothing, and it's a good thing they got something. But to your point is, if you would have just been able to sell off in the middle of last season, you would have had a lot more assets set up for the future. You would have had more draft capital. Maybe you would have had another better player come back or two. I mean, frankly, if this is the way the Bulls are going to go, then you'd really like to stock up on the draft stock. And you get a couple of second rounders. What's that really going to get you? Again, yes, better than nothing. But considering what you could have gotten, it just makes the whole thing frustrating. And I think you and I can share this, and I think most Bulls fans can too, is as many sour feelings as there were with the way this Bulls era transpired. DeMar DeRozan was not the problem. He was the opposite. He was the shining bright spot on that team. Obviously we liked Alex Caruso too. We liked what Kobe White turned into, but consistently DeMar DeRozan played at an all-star level. At one point was playing at an MVP level for this team. So far and away, the best part of this era was DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan put up numbers that, we'll remember for a long time. He was clutch. He was known as the king of the fourth. There was a reason that AK brought him here in the first place. He really was a great Bull here. We understand that you had to move on. We're not saying you didn't have to do that, but um, I hope he does well in Sacramento. He deserves it. I would love to see him win a ring. He's really, really a great teammate from what we know. Seems like a great guy. It's too bad that they couldn't have more success while he was here because there were times he just flat out carried the team on his back.
Yeah, he was absolutely the shining star of a player during his time here, and he was great for the city, great for the fans, and good for the organization. Just that was an absolute home run of a free agent deal, or was that a trade? Did they bring him in a trade? I don't remember.
Well, I
But then
remember when they
whatever they,
when they brought him in, there were a lot of people like, "Oh, why are they doing that?"
yeah, and it turned out to be them bringing him in was an absolute just home run. Ultimately, a home run. It did not for the team, it didn't materialize, but absolutely not his fault at all. And I, you know, is is nothing against him. Absolutely, as a player and a person, you don't want to see him go, but for what's right for the organization, it didn't make sense for him to come back.
No.
Is you are in a weird position where you're too good to get a bad draft or a top draft pick, but you're nowhere near good enough to even make the postseason, let alone compete in it. So you're just in this like no man's land hell, and you've got to pick a lane. And to pick a lane to go to be good, you've got to pony up a lot of money. You have
Yeah.
to, if there's a salary cap, but you pull what like Philadelphia is doing, and you sign in trades and exemptions, and you blow through that salary cap and pay in the luxury, and you buy yourself a team. But Jerry's not going to do that, so you need to go the other direction and tear this down. And the hard part is you already have this, you know, problem with Jerry being the owner, where it's already handcuffing you as far as how you want to handle things. But then, not being able to make the trades and maximize the value that you have of players like Caruso and Drummond and DeMar when they leave, you can't even prepare for the future correctly. They're going to be a bad team this coming year, but they're it's not enough to be able to get some elite player without just absolute luck hitting the lottery.
Well, and I mean that's the thing too. And you mentioned before how the camp made that decision to really want DeMar DeRozan out of there after the Alex Caruso trade. When that Alex Caruso trade was made, you knew where this was going. Like it was more than obvious. They were trying to get younger. They were trying to transition. We all knew that this was going to be the path. And obviously you heard guys like Woj and a lot of other NBA experts, come out and tell you, we know that this is going to be the direction of the Bulls with DeMar DeRozan. We know that they're going to part ways. But look at next year. Let's look at next year right now. And let's assume Zach LaVine is gone. Because even though the interest is little, I think that no matter how little compensation they get, no matter what they have to do, I think Zach LaVine's going to be gone. That whole relationship seems way too strained to me. So, assuming that Zach LaVine is not in the equation, you're going to have Kobe White, you're going to have Ayo Dosunmu, you're going to have Josh Giddey, you're going to have Patrick Williams. Those are some of your main primary pieces that you have on the team. Um, look where Ayo is now. Pretty nice player, rebounded in his last season last year. Look at where Kobe White is. He took some steps forward. Ayo isn't a starting star, and Kobe is, I think a starter, not an all-star level, but a pretty good player. Patrick Williams, we haven't seen it yet. And then I guess you got to assume Vooch is going to be around if they can't get rid of him. But my whole point here is I don't see a good team, but do I see a team that's going to be so bottom feeder bad that they're going to have the highest odds to get the pick? Probably not.
No, especially when there's a unanimous number one pick next year in Cooper Flag. Uh, and so the tank is going to be on, to get the best odds for the number one pick. And the Bulls just aren't bad enough. And the one thing that this trade with DeMar DeRozan did uh, afford the Bulls, and it'll be interesting to see if they choose to weaponize it and how they do so, is the trade created a $17.6 million trade exception for the Bulls. So in theory, they to help facilitate either Zach getting moved or Vooch getting moved out.
Yeah, that is true. And like I said, I think Zach LaVine's good as gone. Right? Like,
If you're asking me, if you can move Vooch, Vooch is the one I'm trading. Is I think I think the way you run an offense could be a lot different with Zach and no Vooch versus Vooch and no Zach.
from
Plus,
a player standpoint, yes.
plus I think is, you're not going to be good, but I feel like if you have a high tempo, fast paced offense and with a lot of young athletic players, if Zach bounces back and is healthy, you can you can highlight the scoring potential he has and build up his value again. And if that's the case, then because right now they're talking about attaching a first round pick to move him. I
Yeah.
just don't think that makes sense. Is you're going to sell on this guy essentially as a salary dump. I would just keep him. I really would. Vooch is the one. He's washed, and you ended up signing Jalen Smith, who I think is intriguing. Um, and given the opportunity, I think you're going to see more out of him than much more out of him than you will from Vooch. And I think then you could put him in as the starter and then bring in a veteran backup center and see how that goes.
I personally don't disagree with anything you said. I don't at all. Here's my thing. From what I'm seeing, and obviously you and I aren't in the locker room, we're not within the organization, but I'm just getting the vibe that the relationship from a perspective of Zach LaVine and the Bulls themselves, it sounds almost broken beyond repair. It doesn't seem good. So,
I don't know I think if I had to guess, I wouldn't say it was like venomous. I would say it is just frustration, and I think both want a fresh start. Um,
yes, yes.
but uh, I think it would if he ends up playing with the Bulls. I think it'll be more awkward than anything else. Um, Kind of like, winding up at a party with an ex-girlfriend or something. Not hate, but you're just like, this is just a weird situation. And from what I understand is, so Zach LaVine has probably the most powerful agent in the NBA, Rich Paul. And Rich Paul has been given carte blanche to try to make a trade, and he has not been able to facilitate at that point. So if Rich Paul is not able to make this trade happen, then I, it's probably one of those situations where Zach is going to start the season with the Bulls. And maybe if things go really well and he plays at that all-star level, then at the trade deadline, you're able to do something. I just don't want to sell low on a guy because he had a really bad year last year, both from a
You
health
know, I
perspective and a fit.
I agree with you. Like I agree with you. I just don't know how this is going to play out. I think that when you look at the Bulls and the situation that they're in, it feels like they want to really try to reset with younger players. And obviously, Vooch is the opposite of that. And I agree, he's the one I would move out first. I don't know if anyone's going to take Vooch. Obviously, with Zach LaVine, I don't think it's a talent issue. It might be a money slash attitude issue that some teams might look at and be like, I don't want that. And hey, you mentioned his agent, and was was he his agent when he got that max deal? Because if so, then yeah, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yep. Um, so yeah, you've got that albatross there. Um, I quickly want to talk about the guy that came in the DeMar DeRozan trade. Obviously the two second round picks are probably what you're banking on the most, but they brought in Chris Duarte, who was a lottery pick. So he was a high draft pick a couple years ago. He's in the last year of his contract, so he's making just shy of $6 million this year. Then he becomes a restricted free agent. Um, he was actually a pretty solid player when he played for the Pacers. But last year, he just absolutely bottomed out in all of his stats. Dropped in scoring, dropped in rebounds, dropped in assists, his 3-point shooting was not that great. So last year, he was under 4 points a game, under 2 rebounds, and under 1 assist, and shooting, 34% from three. He was billed as a really good defensive player, but if you look at the advanced metrics, the Kings were actually 1.5 points better defensively when he was on the bench or not playing. So I think the hope with him is you're only paying, essentially the cash considerations cover most of his salary, so you're not paying much. But I think the hope with him is he bounces back and looks like the player he was with at Indiana. So either, you could try to re-sign him or trade him and get something back, at a trade deadline as an expiring contract. But, if he's the player he was last year, oof, we're not getting a lot out of him.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you wonder if that's an outlier or something, because it'd be nice if he can rebound a bit next year. And even if he doesn't help you win a lot of games, maybe that's some value that you can flip further. But yeah, the stats last year look pretty awful. And like you said, you're not paying much for him. So, it's not like you have to owe him 15 plus $1 million next year. So there's not much at stake with how he plays, but it would definitely be nice if he could rebound from last year. Yeah, I mean, those numbers are pretty ugly. Yeah.
Yeah, but then we bring in Jalen Smith to be that backup center, and I actually am pretty intrigued by this. He's a really long, athletic guy, super good character guy. Um, Last year he shot, it wasn't a ton of volume, but like 42% from the threes. He's a really good offense, not a very good defensive rebounder, but offensive rebounds, he's pretty good. So he should be able to help you in that perspective. But it kind of leaves you with, looking at this team, you've got Jalen Smith, who's 24, Kobe White's 24, Io's 24. Patrick Williams is about to turn 24. Josh Giddey's 21. Dalen Terry's 22. Julian Phillips is 21. And Matas Buzelis is 19. So you've got a young core here. And if you play this right, there's like, we're hating on Giddey. And I think it's mostly because of we didn't get enough in that trade. But
Right.
he's 21 and he's still a guy that has a lot of potential. Uh, Patrick Williams, if he, without DeMar there and maybe without Zach, uh, I think, and there was a point last year at the end of the year where he was playing well. If we can see him blossom and, Kobe continues to take that trajectory where, I think he's a pretty darn good basketball player. Io is a very solid basketball player. We get if we can develop Giddey and Patrick Williams and Matas, you're potentially if you do this right, you could have a pretty solid core of young players. But it's a lot of ifs and buts in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot of ifs.
If all those ifs and buts were candy and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day. Uh, so, but ultimately, it leaves you with where does Zach fit in this lineup? Kobe's got to be your number two. Kobe's got to be your two. Giddey's your one. Are you putting Zach in at three and having a small lineup?
I
I don't know.
I don't know.
Um, so I mean, it's probably going to be Giddey, Kobe, Zach, Patrick Williams, and Vooch, barring any further trades. And that's again, you're parading that lineup out. Is it a good lineup? Nope. Is it going to get you in the playoffs? Absolutely not. But is it going to get you in the hunt for the number one overall pick? Probably not. I think I think they're athletic enough and there's enough offense there that you're gonna win. Yeah, I don't want to say respectable, but you're gonna win enough games where at best you're probably getting fifth or sixth overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, I even joked last night they'll probably get the seventh pick, as
Yeah,
always.
so that's where you're at. And the seventh pick just doesn't doesn't get you to where you need to be.
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, you want the highest pick possible. And like I said, I think with the team that you have, you're not going to be the absolute worst. You're not going to be good, but you're not going to be the absolute worst.
Yeah, and that's I saw some people online arguing about like oh, Bulls fans they uh they want to win, but they don't want to tank to get to the rebuild. And my thing is, I'm a Chicago sports fan. I can live through a rebuild. I've lived through a metric poop ton of them. It's the fact that you're living through a rebuild in a team owned by Jerry Reinsdorf. That's the frustrating part, is because you will never be able to have to make the rebuild work the right way. You've already seen the hindrance on trading to maximize value of your players. And then once it's time to actually pony up money and reinforce the lineup you've built of young players, he's not going to allow you to spend the money you need to make that of just the best team possible. He's just so tight stringed and controlling of everything that as long as Jerry's still alive, this rebuild is not in earnest. It is just they're just dumping salaries and trying to make a cheaper team.
Well, how many rebuilds have the Chicago Bulls gone through since Michael Jordan left? I mean, you had the Jerry Krause, Tim Floyd era. Then you had the Baby Bulls, and then you had the Derrick Rose era, and then after that you traded away Derrick Rose. And then you kind of tried to contend a little bit with Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade and Rondo. And then you tore that all down and you traded Jimmy Butler and you brought in Zach LaVine. And then you tried the rebuild with, Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter Jr. And that didn't work. And then you brought in AK where he retooled everything quickly. And now we're in another rebuild. All of this over the past 2+ decades. And all it's resulted in is one Eastern Conference final appearance. You haven't been to the finals since Michael Jordan left. You haven't been to the Eastern Conference finals outside of one time in 2011, the year Derrick Rose won MVP. I mean, it's just been retool and rebuild after retool and rebuild. It's just an endless cycle. Look, you can point to the Derrick Rose era when you did make it to the conference finals. How many playoff series did you actually win? So, Derrick Rose was rookie of the year. He came in, 2008? And then you made the playoffs a few times. You got bounced in the first round because you were lower seed. Then 2011, you win the first round against the Pacers and then the second round against the Atlanta Hawks. Then you were, outed by LeBron, the Miami Heat. Next year, Rose tears his ACL. First round exit against the Philadelphia 76ers. 2013, you win the one first round against the Brooklyn Nets, and then the Heat get you again. And then you won that first round against the Bucks before LeBron and the Cavs got you. I mean, that's just a small handful of playoff series you've actually won since Jordan left. That's it.
It's when you talk about rebuilds with the Bulls and the White Sox, we all know the common denominator there. But they're never true full rebuilds. Like they're always they either skip steps or they jump from part of it back into from the tear down portion. Like with the Bulls, the White Sox, they keep doing the tear down portion, and then they get these young players, and then as soon as they're trying to get some money, then they sell them off and then relaunch the rebuild. But with the Bulls, they'll get rid of an expensive player. So like, oh, Jimmy wants money, and like, oh, we can't give Jimmy a max contract. Let's trade him for younger, cheaper players. And so it's not a rebuild. You just got rid of your star and kind of retooled. And it's just like the lazy, wrong way to do it. And you've got to fully commit and embrace it and recognize, hey, this is what we're doing. And you have to have a plan. Like you can't just be like, well, man, Jerry told us we got to try to win. So let's alter our whole plan to try to win this year and then wait till that's not how that works. You have to have a roadmap. And I don't know how it's going to turn out ultimately, but next when we talk about the Blackhawks, there's a roadmap for how they're doing that rebuild. And everything is following well on that plan. And you feel a lot more, even though you don't like losing, and they've been worse. The Blackhawks have been worse than the Bulls over these last few years. You feel better about the Blackhawks because there's a vision and
a superstar to build around.
And you got a little bit of luck and a lot of vision and the hard work, and the plan is coming to fruition. The Bulls don't have a plan. You started tearing down. You've got younger players, but you didn't add draft capital to try to accommodate that. You look at their future draft picks, and it is a hot mess. Like when's out before they got these 2 second-round picks from the DeMar trade, the Bulls didn't have like a second-round pick for like next 4 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. And they can say they have a vision. Oh, we want to get younger. Okay, yes, clearly we see that, but then where do you go from there? I mean, right now, I think they're in the phase of, all right, let's ship this stuff out of here. Let's get younger. Let's try to be more athletic. God, we've said that a million times with this team. And then, yeah, the closest, I feel like the Rick Hahn rebuild was the closest or pretty much on point thing you can to a full rebuild. You tore everything down. You built prospects. You built the farm system.
You optimized those trades. They got really good value for the veterans they traded.
They did.
I agree with you. Rick Hahn's rebuild started off really good.
It started off fantastic. And hell, it looked great when it started to look like it was coming together in 2020 when, oh, here's Luis Robert. Here's Eloy Jimenez. Hey, look, Yoel Moncada might be coming into form. Oh, hey, there's Lucas Giolito being the guy we've wanted to be. Oh, hey, we could bring in Yasmani Grandal. Great, that'll be a nice piece. Oh, hey, Andrew Vaughn, we just drafted him. Let's bring him up. Let's see what he can do. Oh, hey, look at Dylan Cease. Oh, look, we got Jose Abreu still, and he's still pretty good. And you're like, wow, maybe this is really working out. And then Jerry hijacked it. He hijacked it by not letting you weaponize the roster. The players, the prospects, some didn't pan out, some got injured a million times. And then, of course, we all know Jerry hired his old senile drunk friend to manage the team. And
And,
that right there was a symbol that, oh, yeah, Jerry Reinsdorf still runs the show.
and I'll tell you exactly why the rebuilds break down the different ways that they do for the White Sox and for the Bulls. Is for the White Sox, the way they make money is having low payroll. So they have to skimp and not pay people and have young players. And once they're due contracts, get rid of those. And because it's the name of the game you you spend little money and that's how you extract dollars. For the Bulls, they have a great attendance. They make a lot of money. So what you have to do is you have to be good enough to make people think, at least the businesses and the executives that buy these season tickets, you have to make it still an exciting prospect. So that's why it's, oh, got to make the playoffs because you can sell. We made the playoffs, even if you get smoked in a 1 game series or in a 3 game series or whatever, you get smoked. You could say this is a playoff team, and so you have to be good enough to be competitive to make a playoff spot, and but not good enough where you have to spend a ton of money to try to be competitive for an NBA title, because that's what you need to do to keep selling those season tickets. And so that's why the Bulls are perennially around, right at the bottom of that the last of the lottery teams and the bottom of the playoff teams. And the White Sox are just at the bottom of the payrolls for big market teams. That's those are the ways that Jerry's going to optimize making money, and it's just bullshit.
Well, and added fact too that he's got that sweet stadium deal for the time
Yeah,
being.
yeah. And but as I said previously, like you look at the Bulls' future draft picks. So next draft, the Bulls could have 2 first round picks, or they could have no first round picks with nothing, no trades involved. So they still are owed for the Lauri Markkanen trade. They're still owed the Blazers' first round draft pick, but it's a top 14 pick protected.
Ugh.
So if it's inside the top 14, it's a lottery pick, then the Bulls don't get that pick next year and kicks the can down the road. But if it's 15 or later, the Bulls then will get it. And then uh
Top 14. Jeez.
yeah, and then the Bulls owe a first round pick to the Spurs that's top 10 protected. So if the Bulls draft outside the top 10, then their first round pick belongs to. So if the Spurs end up picking 13th and the Bulls pick 11th, then the Bulls get no first round picks this year.
A disaster.
And the Bulls' second round pick for this year uh, belongs to the Spurs. Um, and then they don't have a second round pick. So this is barring pre-DeMar trade. I don't know exactly where these second round picks, if they were San Antonio picks or if they were um, Sacramento picks. But 2026, the Bulls have their own first round pick and potentially the Blazers pick, depending on how they end up. But they have no second round pick. They owe that uh, to the Wizards. And then they owe the Wizards their 2027 second round pick. So it's not until 2028, until they have just their full, uh, arsenal of their own picks. So how do you optimize this rebuild when you're not bringing in quality players and trades and you're not bringing back draft capital that's worthwhile?
Yeah, and that's why it just pisses you off that Reinsdorf just wanted to make the playoffs and go nowhere last year instead of optimizing the future because you could
Yeah,
have had a lot more draft assets.
yeah. So it behooves the Bulls to um to have a bad year this year because then you get to at least keep your first round pick if it's a top 10 draft pick. And this is a team that probably will draft in the top 10, unless you just really have bad luck in the lottery.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the opposite of the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks have so many draft picks that they're trading up and combining picks to get, quality over quantity. And the Bulls don't have either. They don't have quality or quantity. It
Go
just sucks.
us.
So I just don't understand. One hand I can be like, listen, they're getting younger, more athletic. All right, that's always a good thing in basketball, but I don't understand after that what is their plan. Like this, the players don't all seem like they fit together. You have some albatross contracts that you would love to get rid of that I don't see the plan to get rid of them, and I don't know what the roadmap is to getting you there. You look and the Bulls, the cash spend, I mean, there's the cap, but there's the manipulation of the cap. And the Bulls' cash spend is significantly less than like Boston or Philadelphia or some of the other teams that are are going to be competitive for the NBA title.
I mean, that's the whole thing. So what? You become younger and athletic. Okay, maybe you get something in Josh Giddey. Maybe you see Kobe White get a little better. What does that lead to? What does that lead to? Where are you going to get a superstar?
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't have a superstar, you need a superstar.
I mean, are we going to just aim for the same thing again, where you just want to be some middle of the road team, or like 2022, where at best you're like a middle seed and your ceiling is maybe win a playoff series? Seriously, I mean this team, we're not going to be talking anything about titles with the Chicago Bulls for maybe 5+ years to a decade.
Oh yeah, this there's no there. I mean, I don't even want to put a date on this because
No,
there
you
is
can't.
there is no plan. So how am I able to say, oh yeah, in this time frame? Because there's no plan in place, and unless you see like Kobe or Patrick Williams take this huge step forward,
Yeah,
which
right.
which I think we will see a better Patrick Williams, but I think it'll just be a guy that is a, a slightly above average starter. I think that's going to be his cap, his peak. And you can win having a player like that on there, but he's not the reason you win. He's like you need a superstar. But maybe Josh Giddey takes this huge step forward and fills uh that potential that he had, and Matas becomes a superstar. Like that's if, but those are things I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. I'm playing the same game of fingers crossed. I hope so.
I mean, frankly, I have no expectations. I have none.
No.
I have no expectations.
And somebody laughed at me because on like I think it was like an NBC Sports Chicago article about Drummond leaving, and somebody on Facebook and somebody commented, they're like, the Bulls are dumb. They they let Andre Drummond walk. And I was like, I'm with you. Like, I would like to have had Andre Drummond back, but he was a unrestricted free agent. There's nothing they could do. He wanted to go to Philadelphia and try to win a title. And the person laughed at me, and I'm like, honestly, Philadelphia has a really darn good basketball team. If they stay healthy, I would probably have them as my favorite to win the conference, even over Boston.
Yeah, I mean, if healthy, they're a contender, that's for sure. I mean,
So I mean, Andre Drummond is hedging his bets. There is he was wanted and courted to a team that is on paper extraordinarily good. He's optimizing his chances to win an NBA title.
yeah, I mean, what? You want to come back to the Bulls? Or do you want to go to a team that actually has a chance?
Yeah.
Seems like an easy choice.
Yep. Absolute easy choice. The Bulls probably could have given him a little more money, but at this point, he has made a ton of money in his career. It's not that much of a difference in the money he would get for these contracts that, uh, you know, would make a difference in having to suffer through another year.
Yeah. Should have traded him last year when you had the chance.
Yep. Yep. Do you want to talk Blackhawks?
Yeah.
So, boy, did Kyle from Chicago make a lot of moves in free agency.
Yes, he did. And I want to say congratulations on making the call on Teuvo Teravainen.
Thank you. I thought that was a good fit. Thought he was
Yep.
a good fit for the Blackhawks, and I'm happy. I think it was a reasonable contract. Um, the Blackhawks spent a lot of money, and I think they overpaid on several guys, but it's not harming them right now. They're all short to medium length contracts. Um, so I'm okay with them.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a quote overpay, I mean, Tyler Bertuzzi's on a 4-year deal, $22 million. That's an average of 5.5 million a year. Maybe that fourth year seems like a bit of an overpay, but I still like the fact that they made that deal. Maybe you look at TJ Brody too, a 2-year deal, but I mean, overall, it's like, okay, you brought in Tyler Bertuzzi. He can give you 40 points and he can, get physical too. I think that's kind of a nice thing to have with a team that's up and coming. You're going to have Connor Bedard, who's still only a teenager. So we saw at the end of last year how guys were just coming at him. And obviously, Nick Foligno stepped in there and was kind of that leader figure that was going to go after. But Nick Foligno's a fourth liner. Tyler Bertuzzi brings more than just veteran leadership and tough grittiness, but can also score some goals too. I like the way he moves down the ice. Obviously, we talked about Teuvo. When he was here during the Cup years, he was kind of in that weird spot where you're so stacked. You just it was hard to thrive with a team that's stacked. For a guy like, a young player, you're not going to get priority over that core that was in the middle of a cup run. But now you'll have a more important role. And we saw what he did in Carolina. So we know the guy's got talent. And, being on this team now, he'll won't be in the doghouse like he was in those years during the cup runs.
Yeah, it's I've seen some criticisms of what the Blackhawks have done in um, uh, their free agency, but I see whether they work out or not. Again, that is a crystal ball type of thing, but I see the logic of what they did. So it's very clear that Kyle Davidson realized a couple of things. One, some of these young players, when you throw them in to the NHL when they're not quite ready, uh, it's not the best possible thing for the young player. There's some players that they'll still, when you put sink or swim, they're going to swim. Connor Bedard came in and swam, but Lucas Reichel had his
Mm.
struggles. Korchinski had some struggles. Wyatt Kaiser had some struggles, and nothing where you're like you worried long term, but they just need to marinate a little more in the AHL or wherever. And I think he realized that. And so he also realized that this team needed some more veteran leadership and this team needed to be tougher. So he brought in guys that are veterans. Most of them are towards the tail end of their careers. So they don't become roadblocks. If TJ Brody, you bring him in a 2-year deal as a defenseman, he's 34 years old. So like, oh, you got an old man. Well, he's on the back end of his the far back end of his the beginning of his back end of his career, but the far back end of his prime. Uh, but you know what? If either he's not playing well or you have Korchinski that's killing it in Rockford, and it's just like it's time. He's ready. You move up and you move on from a TJ Brody. Okay, cool. You're not losing out on anything. You're not burying him with some sort of barrier or roadblock for him to come. The same thing with Alec Martinez. Um, Same thing with Craig Smith. Uh, Pat Maroon. Like none of these guys they're all older guys. You're not blocking your young players. You're providing yourself a I don't want to say bulletproof, but you're providing yourself with a safety net where if some of those young players aren't ready to go or you want to give them some more seasoning in the AHL, you can do that and not cost your NHL club.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Pat Maroon and he's kind of like, well, he's a body at this point. He hasn't been very good, but he's making 1.3 million. You brought back Joey Anderson. We talked about them probably bringing him back, which was, I think, a good move to bring him back. 2-year, 1.6 million. That's pocket change. Craig Smith, again, another veteran that you're having on a roster. And then Alec Martinez, the man that broke our hearts in 2014, that shocking overtime goal against the Kings, that just oh, that was a dagger to the heart. But experienced guy. He's obviously won the cup, multiple cups. A lot of these guys have, a Stanley Cup pedigree. Maroon won a cup, Martinez won a cup. So you're
Martinez
bringing
and
in some,
Martinez and Maroon have a combined 6 Stanley Cups.
yeah,
That's
see,
not
there you go.
that is something that I think is important. It's important for Bedard to learn about winning.
Yeah. And, again, I'm not expecting a lot. I think Alec Martinez can still be decent, nothing special, but decent. Again, Maroon, Craig Smith are just, they're guys on a roster, they're veterans on a roster. But I mean, overall, you look at what they've done and you project where you think some of the guys are going to be. So Bedard taking another step, more Frank Nazar on your team. Korchinski may be taking that next step next year. We'll see kind of how that development goes. Because, he did have some struggles at the NHL level. I still think there's a lot of promise, but he was a very young player and he clearly wasn't always ready for the big show.
Yeah, he's a guy
But
that I'm very high on. I think he's going to be really good for the Blackhawks. It's just he wasn't quite ready for prime time, and I think some of these moves made it so he doesn't have to be.
right, exactly. You got bodies to fill those positions for young guys that are trying to develop. And, maybe, hey, maybe Alec Martinez plays well and you can flip him at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, dream scenario for the Blackhawks is some of these young defensemen are just beaten down the door. And because I mean, you look at this, and I mean, I just threw together a rough, my rough guess of what the lines are going to look like in the pairings. So I have Vlasic and Seth Jones as the top defensive pairing. Um, Korchinski and Murphy, Martinez and Brody. I think you have room for one young defenseman, uh, you know, in there. Um, and so one guy makes it up, and the other guys go marinate in Rockford. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think the dream scenario is those guys all come beating down the door and they're ready for the NHL. And you could flip some of these guys that are on low cost, low deals, like 1 year, 2 year minimal dollars, flip those and bring yourself some prospects or some draft picks, and then you have your young players that have got some more seasoning in the AHL playing first line, first pairing minutes, and you go from there. I think it's smart. I don't know how it plays out. All these things have to play out, but I think the logic there was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Um, the Tyler Bertuzzi, I agree with you. You probably went a little bit higher dollars or a little bit too long a years what he might have gotten elsewhere, but I think he's a definite top six forward, and you were in dire need for those. And he brings you a lot of things that Connor Bedard isn't good at, and things that Connor Bedard isn't good at, he excels at. Like Tyler Bertuzzi, he wins, he wins pucks and he wins battles at the net. He gets those greasy goals, and that is going to be huge on a line with Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing too is you're still trying to mold Connor Bedard into a super because I mean, listen, he played great last year for an 18-year-old, but there's still so much that needs to be grown with him, and we know that. Everybody knows that. And I think that just having more of these veterans, you saw how well Bedard responded to veterans like Nick Foligno and bringing in more guys and guys with a bit more skill, that's only going to make him better because you're actually going to have players on a team that could be relied on to score, not named Connor Bedard. Because if you remember, their offense was terrible last year. And when they didn't have Connor Bedard, scoring a goal was like virtually impossible.
Yeah.
But
And
now you have some guys that can score.
yeah, you've added legitimate top six forwards, and that will help. Also, and just like with the defensemen, you've got enough guys where you're not forced to make Frank Nazar or Landon Slager or Colton Dock or whoever make that jump earlier than they need to. You can you can put these lines together, and suddenly you're like, okay, this is are they going to be a playoff team? Probably not,
No,
but
no.
not an embarrassment either.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too that we really have to emphasize here is we know that they didn't just suddenly become a playoff team because look at their division too. The Wild look like they're going to be pretty good. Nashville just went crazy. They got Steven Stamkos. And I think they got Marcia Show too. So they went out and they spent money to have probably what I'd say a 3, 4 year window of prime contention because that's the length of a lot of the contracts they signed. These guys that they brought in like Stamkos, they're in their early to mid 30s. So, luckily for that, the Blackhawks aren't going to have to compete with that in their prime window while Nashville's doing that right now. And then obviously you look at Colorado in the Western Conference and you have the Golden Knights and you have the King. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the Western Conference, and the Blackhawks are still going to be among the lower, but you just got to see the strides in play. And
all
listen, we know that last year was going to be the bottoming out, and you don't go typically from the NHL, it's really hard to go from bottoming out. We just need to see the progression.
yeah, that's the thing is you don't there's a there's a trajectory is you bottom out, you build up the draft capital, you bring in the young players, and then you build back up. And like we talked about where the Bulls and the White Sox don't go through that whole process, Kyle Davidson is. And I think, he might have I think if Kyle Davidson had his way, he would try to squeeze one more bottom feeder year out of this. But I think a lot of the feedback that he got from veterans like Foligno and Seth Jones on their exit interviews were they were tired of losing the way they did and being just a dog shit team. I think
Yes.
I think he heard that and said, "All right, I can't. The fans are going to mutiny. The players are going to mutiny. I'm gonna possibly screw up Bedard. Um, I can't put this another bottom feeder team in.
Well,
I've
and
got to."
right, because that's the thing that some people are trying to argue. Well, they need another lottery pick. They need another blah, blah, blah. I'm like, to an extent, I get what you're trying to say because I usually kind of like the rule of two where you need two legit superstars to win a cup. Obviously, we had Kane and Tays here. We saw Crosby and Malkin all those years. So it kind of makes sense there. But man, you'd be asking for a third straight bottoming out year from an original six team and a second straight year where your superstar in the making is wasting on his rookie deal because you're just bottoming out. I don't think that was a realistic ask from this franchise. You needed to take a step forward, even if that step forward isn't playoffs or real contention. You want to be watching meaningful-ish hockey through at least the holidays and not be like, okay, we're absolutely not making the playoffs when you're saying that before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you add in an 80 game season, if you add like 10 to 12 more wins, you're still looking at like a top six pick, but you're significantly improved in that, from what you were. That was how bad you were last year.
And
Is
even in some of those losses, you want to see more competitive losses.
yeah, it's and I think that having these veterans there puts you in a position of, hey, like, you know, as a coach, you can rally them and know that you're only going to be so bad. You're not going to have those ebbs and flows with young players. You know what you're getting. Um,
Right.
TJ Brody, like there was a point in his career where he was a really good defensive defenseman, and he's not that anymore. He's dropped off, but he's still a pretty effective defenseman. Um, Alec Martinez is still effective where he is. And then what, as far as preventing goals and causing some of their losses, there was a bajillion reasons why they weren't good, but a big one was Arvid Soderblom was pretty bad last year,
Yeah.
and you replaced him with a goalie who's actually pretty darn good in Laurent Brossoit. Brossoit, I think that pronouncing that correctly. You brought him on a 2 year, $6.5 million contract, and there's a good chance that he could. I mean, he's possibly get the lion's share of the starts, but at worst, closer to 50-50. And you add in a couple of more seasoned defensemen that are defensive defensemen, you're looking at, less goal chances and less goals to the opponent. Keeps you in games better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was really smart bringing in an experienced NHL goaltender because you can't rely on putting 80% of the weight on Peter Mrazek at this point. And Peter Mrazek had a really, really nice year last year. And I just don't know if you're going to see that repeat again. I, I just don't think he'll be anything mind blowing because there were games last year where he still stood on his head and either helped the Blackhawks steal a win or kept the Blackhawks in a game they had absolutely no business being in. But adding an experienced goaltender not only gives you more quality in between in between the pipes, but you're getting a guy that can help lift some of the weight off the shoulders of Peter Mrazek.
Right. Um, and so with the players that they've brought in, uh, you know, which is they brought in a lot of players. They really churned this roster. I mean, just a ton of players. I was not expecting that many moves. Um, I put together. I mean, this is really really early. This is the lines I've put together, and we'll see how these actually look
Okay.
training camp. Top line: Bertuzzi, Bedard, Kurashev, um, Taylor Hall, Jason Dickinson, Tavo on the second line.
And that's key right there is having a healthy Taylor Hall next.
Yes, a healthy Taylor Hall and a Tavo is a very good secondary scoring line.
He's so much better than whatever you had last
Yeah.
year.
The third line I have is Reichel, Athanasiou, and Mikheyev, the guy they just traded for,
Okay, yep. Mhm.
Mikheyev. And the fourth line, Foligno, Donato, and Maroon.
I mean, hey, makes sense to me.
That fourth line is they could beat you up too. But I think you add some toughness with some skill, and I this is not a terrible team.
It's better than what you had.
Yeah,
It's better than what.
yeah, I think this is actually, they're not going to win a Stanley Cup, but they're going to be a team that is a very solid team, and I think they're going to be coached very well. And the fact that you'll have veterans in there, who I think, you're not teaching, you're coaching. And I think that's going to be a huge difference that you'll notice in these games. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out. Like I'm not delusional. I mean, I know if you take the biggest 1 year jump in NHL history and add that to the Blackhawks, uh, you are you're making the playoffs, but you are still like the fourth seed. Like you're not the number one seed. You're like the fourth seed, and it's adding the highest jump ever in NBA or NHL history. So I'm not delusional. I just feel like they fixed some of their biggest holes. No secondary scoring, lack of
And I
veteran
mean,
leadership, lack of backup goalie play, and did you bulletproof them? No, but did you patch those? Yes.
yeah, I mean, by the end of last year, it was really, really rough. Really, really rough because you didn't have Taylor Hall for pretty entire season, and you were down to fourth liners and inexperience. Obviously you had a few decent seasons from like Joey Anderson and Jason Dickinson, but that wasn't enough to really carry you anywhere. Now you actually have some experienced guys who can put up points, can put up goals, and defensemen that have done the job before and don't think unless there are injuries, it can't really get any worse.
Yeah, and I have Reichel in here. I'm hoping because you saw some good play towards the end of the season from him that he plays more consistently, but be based on his like new contract, if you try to send him down to Rockford, he's got to go through waivers. Somebody's going to take him. So he's up there and he's going to be, so you put him down in the third line and let him try to mature there. Otherwise, it would, probably behoove him to go to Rockford for a little bit and play, some more meaningful minutes. And the nice
Yeah,
thing
I
too,
feel like this is.
the
No,
nice
go
thing
ahead.
too is, you've got these veterans up there, and like I said, is if they're not playing well or somebody's playing extraordinarily well down in Rockford, you can bring them up and replace them. But it also gives you good talent at the Rockford level. And I alluded to this in the intro, is, potentially this could be your Ice Hogs. Colton Dock, Frank Nazer, Brett Seney as your top line, Gavin Hayes, Cole Gutman, Zach Sanford as your second line, Landon Slaggert, Paul Lewinsky, Sammy Savoy, and your goalie, Drew Comesso, who you're very, very high on if you're the Blackhawks, and giving Soderblom some time there. And then defensemen, you got Ethan Del Mastro, Nolan Allen, Isaac Phillips, Crevier. You've got some good talent in Rockford that are going to be able to play good competitive minutes and prep for being with the NHL.
I really like that Davidson signed Artie Party to the deal because there was a lot of speculation. Was he going to go back to college? Was he going to come to the Blackhawks organization? And Kyle Davidson spelled out the big upside of having him in the organization. So they were able to sign him on that entry level deal. So really exciting to see that.
Yeah, I love it. I think it would have been a bad idea to bring um your rookie defenseman to the NHL. He's got all the talent in the world to be a really high quality NHL defenseman. There are just things that he did in college that I'm sure some of it was coaching for that level, but that you're going to break him of some of the habits. And there's just some, seasoning he's going to have to do because the AHL is significantly more like a better competition than the NCAA. So I think having him in your organization and working him with him to uh, improve on some of those skills and without having to worry about what some college coach is trying to get him to do because Michigan State is trying to win a national championship. So they're going to do whatever they can because that's their goal. So, if you have Artie Party and in Rockford, you have your Blackhawk best interests in heart. So you're working with him with your coaching staff to get to him to where you need to be so he can become that number one defenseman in your system. So I'm happy about it. I don't know if we'll see him this year. I'm fine with that, but having him in your organization, I think was key and to his development. I think it was the right choice.
Yeah, I think so too. And just so you know, yes, I will pretty much be always referring to him as Artie Party because it's fun.
It is fun. It is fun. Um, I hadn't seen that before this weekend, and when I saw it like the other day, I was like, that is a fun nickname, and I want to keep using that.
It is fun. I remember I called Artem Anisimov Artie Party back in the day, but we got a new Artie Party.
The the revisited, reinvented.
Artie Party 2.0, the new Artie Party, this year's Artie Party, however you want to say it.
Um, let's see. Um, do you want to talk baseball?
I have a few things to say, not much, but a few things.
All right, let's go.
So, I mean, first of all, congratulations to Shota Imanaga and Garrett Crochet on making their respective All-Star teams. It's no surprise. We knew that they were going to be representatives from the All-Star team. You might have a few snubs in Justin Steele, even though he probably just didn't pitch enough. He pitched like an all-star. He's been awesome. He pitched that complete game the other day. But I think missing a month plus kind of hurt his stock there. Eric Fetty, I also think was deserving. And, position wise, I think you can make an argument for Michael Bush. Maybe Ian Happ, but that's about it, really. And that's kind of pushing it. But congratulations to those guys. They really did earn it. Um, Yeah, a lot of just bad right now. A lot of bad, a lot of gloomy, a lot of droopy. And like I said early in the show, I'm not getting back on because the Cubs won three of their last four. I mean, you beat up on a bad Angels team, and then, obviously you took two or three, and one of the games you lost, you got your ass beat, but you ended up winning the series. Both games were that you won were not particularly close or competitive. The Cubs pretty much controlled that. Um, Ian Happ's hitting really well right now. Seeing him hit the two, 3 run homers and going 4 for 4, whatever it was, on the 4th of July was a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, it just everything feels so far gone with the Cubs at this point, and the Sox were just counting down on the guys we pretty much know they're going to sell. It's like what else can you say? I mean, with the Cubs, it's you got pitchers breaking their hands after punching the wall. Your starting pitching's really good, though Kyle Hendricks is bad again and he might be hurt. Just ugh,
Assad is supposed to be able to come back soon.
yay.
Um, I'm nothing hopeful for this Cubs team.
No.
Um, I now the curiosity will be, are they sellers at the deadline?
So I think you have to do some sort of shakeup. Not major. You're not going to go major, but does a team offer you something for Cody Bellinger? And if you're not in the race, I think you got to listen.
Because otherwise he's going to opt out. And you're going to lose him for nothing anyway.
If he
Um,
opts out, is a
I,
team going to pay him more than what he's hitting okay, but he's not slugging.
I don't know. I feel like somebody would pay him, even if it was another short-term deal. Um,
It is a Boris client.
it's true. I wonder if Boris learned anything from this past off season. Like
Maybe
he's changing up his approach.
could be. I mean, between Cody Bellinger and Matt Chapman, and wasn't Jordan Montgomery a Boris client too?
I think so.
Wasn't Blake Snell a Boris client as well, or no?
Yeah, I believe he was as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so we'll see how his approach changes and that changes anything with potentially with him opting out. But I've heard rumblings that Nico Horner could be on the move.
Yeah, that was more speculation from what I understood. But I don't think they're going to trade him. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, when I think of trades with this Cubs team and selling, like, okay, maybe if Mark Leiter Jr. is healthy, you flip him for something, or I don't know, sell Hector Neris for some bobby pins. And I mean, you're not trading Vance.
Would you trade Seiya?
I'd listen to offers. I'm not going to give a hard yes or no, but I would definitely listen.
It's a weird spot the Cubs are in because you don't hate the players they have, but they don't have a superstar to meld around.
You don't have
And,
a superstar, and the dynamic just doesn't work.
and so you don't want to sell low on players you have. And I feel like a lot of if they're trying to move people, you're going to sell low. So I would be opening to listen to trades on most anybody, but I just because I'm listening doesn't mean I'm going to pull the trigger.
Right. And I mean, there is a, I don't want to sell low either, but what if your whole philosophy was, hey, we have some outfield prospects that we're really high on. Do you just say, you know what? We're going to make a sell low trade just to get X name out of the way,
Like who?
like Seiya or a Bellinger.
I,
I'm not saying that
you're
they
saying
should do that, but
to make room for the minor league players to come up.
right. So like if you're a believer in an Owen Casey or something like that.
I don't think that's a bad idea. I think you can't sell multiple. I think you have to.
No.
Um, it's you've got to be calculated, and if you feel like Bellinger is going to opt out, then yeah, you move on from him. Um, and it's that's what you got to do. Man, I between Saya and Ian,
Ian's
I
hard because you have an NTC there.
yeah, and Ian is a significantly better defensive player. And whatever that gold equivalent of a gold glove in Japanese baseball is, it's not worth a crap because how does Suzuki have so many of those when he's not a very good defender?
Seems like
Um,
he's got the yips.
yeah, like we beat up um, Kyle Schwarber, and he made himself serviceable at the end.
Yeah,
But
and you know what? He can make up for it by hitting 40 tanks.
is Ian Happ is a significantly better defensive player, but I like the upside of Suzuki at the plate more. Um,
Though, give credit to Ian Happ. He's like the one consistently clutch hitter on this team.
so, but I would listen to trades on either one.
Yeah, it's, I've been a big Seiya Suzuki advocate. Big one. Big one. And we've seen flashes where he legitimately looks like an all-star. And then we see these flashes where he looks like a deer in headlights at the plate. Like, when he's on and he's aggressive and he's spraying the ball and slugging, you see it, and then he'll have this stretch where they're throwing him cookies right down the middle, and he's just kind of staring at it, like he has no idea what's coming. He's a very streaky hitter, and I think when it all is said and done, it usually comes together as good numbers. But like so many of these other players, he's very, very streaky, and I think overall he's been good. But I think there were higher expectations that just haven't been met. And I do think it doesn't help that he's had lat injuries. I think that has hurt him in a way. I mean, dude, before he got hurt this year, early in the season, those first few weeks, he was mashing,
Yes,
absolutely mashing.
and one thing, I mean, I know we're a long way off from off season, but can we can we use some of that Nick Madrigal voodoo magic, learn how to play third base, and get Bush to be a third baseman again? So when we bring in Pete Alonso, he can play first base, and and then we've got both corners figured out. Is
Yeah,
that too
well,
much to ask? Is that too much to ask?
I don't know. Dude, like I legitimately like Michael Bush.
I do too, but I would really like to have Pete Alonso's bat in Wrigley Field on
Oh,
a
for
regular
sure.
basis.
No, for sure. I totally agree. I totally agree. Totally.
I think that, I don't think Pete Alonso is an elite hitter, but I think that he's got so much power that it makes that lineup significantly more dangerous.
And his power is consistent. Like he's consistently every year 35, 40 homer guy, which you don't have right now on this team. And he's, in home run derbies every year. So the
I
guy
mean,
can swing it.
the guy, like the polar bear is a apt nickname. Like he is just a big, strong man.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, he is.
And I would love to just watch him clobber home runs for the Cubs. It just, I always worry about signing a guy and being like, oh, we'll put him at DH because there's been a plenty of guys who they don't bat as well if they're not in the field. I don't know if it's a staying in the game thing where, you know, just sitting for so long that you kind of take
Mental
yourself out of the game.
focus.
Yeah,
Sure.
um So I even if he ends up being a DH for the Cubs, and this is a big hypothetical here, but I would love for there to be a spot for him to play in the field if that's what's going to help him be a better hitter. So that would be why I would love for Bush to get, he's played third base. I would love for them to work on him becoming a third baseman if needed to fill that hole, or at least make him, a, you know, a more versatile player.
Right. I don't know. I mean, here's the other thing too. If you're going to start trading away, are you going to keep Jed Hoyer to do that? And then what do you do in the offseason?
I don't know. I Jed has got a lot of big decisions that he needs to make, and he's got to make the right ones.
It's a little frightening, honestly. I just, where are you going with this regime? Because remember last year when the stupid Jerry Reinsdorf White Sox sold off with Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, and then they fired them? Like, if you really wanted to move to Chris Getz, get rid of them before so they're not the ones making the trades, the guys that you couldn't trust to make the team a winner.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know. Because if you let Hoyer trade off, are you letting him stay another few years? Because next year is his last year, and are you going to have a lame duck president of baseball operations?
Do you honest? I mean, he could, but do you honestly think Jed is potentially going to get fired or not renewed?
Honestly, I don't.
I think he is here for the long haul.
I kind of feel the same way.
Um, I if you look, he's he hasn't produced based on the money they spend. He hasn't been produced. He hasn't produced to the expectations that we have for this franchise, but he also hasn't been abysmal either. It would be based on expectations. So I, if they're not, if they pull another season like this one next year, yeah, there's probably potential for him to be gone. But as long as they're at least being competitive for a playoff position, I think he's sticking around. I think
Well,
between the money they're making and selling out, I think he's here.
and I will argue this. I do think Tom Ricketts cares more than the fans want to believe. And I do think that he too had high expectations and is going to be very let down if they don't meet those expectations. It's just a matter of, can Jed Hoyer convince him to keep him around? And here's what I'm afraid of. I can already hear it now. Jed Hoyer is going to use the "we were injured a lot" excuse. I can hear it right now.
Yeah, I don't want that
And
excuse.
I don't want it either, but you know it's coming. You know it's
I
coming.
would love to. I would love if he says that publicly. I'll just be annoyed. But if he's using that behind the scenes where the real conversations happen, that is going to be bad. I would love for to be a fly on the wall in this conversation, but I would love for Jed to flat out say, Tom, stop being stingy. Give me more money and overspend,
But you know what?
overspend, and bring us in a superstar.
But I'm going to also counter this too. Tom Ricketts can say, "I gave you a top 10 payroll. Why are you not winning? Why are the Milwaukee Brewers with half your payroll outclassing you? Why are the Cleveland Guardians with a fraction of that payroll outclassing you.
That's fair. That is fair. Um, there's going to have to be.
Your $177 million shortstop looks like a bum this season.
That is also fair. All these things are fair. I think you can ask more of ownership, but Jed's gotta look in that mirror and have that tough conversation with himself too about, did his plan work?
Of
And
course.
there are things to be very excited about. Is the starting pitching has been really good,
Mm-hmm.
and that is that is a big part of the equation. There are teams that would kill to have that kind of starting pitching, but you've got to put together the whole roster, and you
If you
know
had a goddamn bullpen at the beginning of the year and you blew half the saves that you've blown this year, things could be so much different position wise.
you know
It's
I've been
just unreal.
I've been saying the same thing, and we would be in it, but are we really in it, or would we just be mathematically in it? Because
You'd be mathematically in it,
I
yes.
don't feel they're good enough to be competitive for a playoff spot, other
But
than
if
the
you
fact
were
that.
but if you were mathematically in it, then you could buy and make yourself better.
But if so, let's say your bullpen is meh. They haven't been a disaster like they are. They were just meh, and you made some of those saves to keep yourself competitive. So let's say the bullpen is not just a big abysmal. Uh, what was that thing called from Labyrinth? The bog of eternal stench. Um, like if your bullpen wasn't the bog of eternal stench, then and your starting pitching's great, what are you doing then at the trade deadline to try to push to become a competitive playoff team? Realistically,
I think you get a bat. I think you get a big time arm. I think you get at least one of you get at least one of each. Whether that's a trade, whether that's a call up, you'd make it work or try to make it work.
so I'm a little less optimistic. I think there's still more than one bat, but you know what? Like, they've been this bad with players with injuries, players playing poorly. Like, if who's to say if they've been all this bad? What if Dansby returns to even the form he had last year?
He could.
And and uh All-Star break, Seiya gets a few days off, comes back, feels a little better, and starts having a little more pop. You added a power bat, and Cody Bellinger starts hitting like Cody Bellinger. Like, it takes one hot hitter to change the whole trajectory of a team.
Look what the Diamondbacks did last year.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that'll happen, and I'm well beyond that point. They're a broken team, but you know you have a point that if you were able to stay in that race, anything's possible. If you add one X factor in there.
Right. Right. And I mean, it's all moot now. I mean, the complicated thing is if you're at the, let's say, the week before the trade deadline, and you're like 4.5 out of the wild card, maybe five. What is their threshold? I could tell you our threshold, but what's theirs?
I don't know. I mean, I think if they're 4.5, 5 games out of the wild card, I I don't think it's going to be an all or nothing situation. I think it's going to be degrees and how hard they work it. So
I agree.
I think if they are 4.5, 5 games out in that range, I could see them making some small moves. Maybe adding you know, a veteran bullpen arm or something. Um, but I don't think they would make a significant trade. If they're 2 games out, I could see them actually going all in. But if they're more than five, what's at a certain point you just go, yeah, I point of making a trade.
Well, and
We're
there's the issue too of you could be 4 games out, but you could have 4 teams ahead of you in between.
That's the part that's bad is they're not like out of the wild card. Like I haven't looked at it in the last week or so, but they weren't terribly out of it. But there was just so many teams in front of them that it makes it so hard to, unless you go on a huge run where you're just beating everybody, is if you just start playing slightly better, it's really tough to gain on that many. So I don't know. I don't know where this goes. I don't have a lot of expectations of this team, and it's just I'm I'm sad at this point.
So am I. It's sad. It really is sad.
It's not fun to watch baseball.
No, for anybody. Hey, did you see that graphic about Chicago sports teams this year?
Yeah, I saw that this morning. Oof.
Awful, man. Just awful.
We've got hope. There's no hope with the White Sox. There's no hope with the Bulls. There's minimal hope with the Cubs. But and the Blackhawks, there's hope, but it's kind of far down the road.
The
Where
long road ahead,
it's a
yes.
long road, but you feel good about the road. The road is paved pretty well, and so you don't mind traveling on it, but it's a long road.
Hmm.
We all have our eggs in the Bears basket.
Isn't that scary? Isn't that a scary thought?
It's super scary. It's super scary. Um, and but it's what we have. It's
Yay.
what we have.
I don't know if it was PPF football. Somebody posted how Matt Eberflus is the betting favorite to win Coach of the Year.
I mean, here's the thing about
Uh,
Coach of the Year is, uh, do they give it to the best coach?
no,
No,
they give it
it's
to like the big improvement.
yes. So I could see that based on that because Matt Nagy won one, and
Yes, he did.
so
Same year that Ryan Pace won Executive of the Year.
yeah. So could he win it? Yeah. Would it be deserving? Probably not. I've warmed up a little bit to the Flus. Um, he's not an elite guy. He's not going to out strategy you. I put him in the bucket of like the Lions head coach, where he's not going to out strategy you, but he's changed the philosophy and the mentality of the team to will them to do things. I think that's where the bucket where Flus is, and there's room for those kind of guys to do it, but man, you've got to do a real good job and have good coordinators around you because you also need to be a strategy guy too to win it all.
Yep, for sure.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? It's really not a lot of Bears stuff.
No real football thoughts. So I think I've said my piece.
Yeah, I think next weekend is like the last Sunday we have without Bears activity for like 7 months. My wife loves this time of year, and I hate this time of year.
I hate this time of year because it makes me delusional often about my winter teams, even though now I think I've kind of learned past that.
Oh, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with friends, how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, or ShyFanPat2 for Alex on Twitter/X, or AlexanderJPatCreative.com for all the cool stuff that Alex does. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like... Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears! Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.